Hello and welcome. The day has gone, but the night has only begun. It's time to quiet the mind and soothe the soul. Let these peaceful images and the promise of renewal carry you into a deep and restful sleep. Breathe in and out. Let's begin. Act 1. Setup. Section 1 of 30. The Silent Loom. The silence in the small, earthen-floored workshop was not merely an absence of sound, but a presence. It was a heavy, woolen blanket smothering the echoes of what once had been. This was the silence of abandoned purpose, a shrine to a god that had died. Here, in the village of Oakhaven, a place nestled in a fold of the world so deep and forgotten that even major trade routes bypassed it by a week's journey, Kaelen practiced his small, deliberate penance. His fingers, which had once danced upon the very threads of fate and plucked the harmonies that spun galaxies into being, now moved with a clumsy, mortal deliberation. They sorted through a tangle of coarse, undyed sheep's wool, the fibers catching on the calluses that were no longer the marks of a celestial artisan, but of a simple, terrestrial mender. The task before him was a farmer's torn winter cloak, thick with the smell of loam and hard labor. The tear was a jagged, disrespectful thing, and Kaelen applied himself to its repair with a grim, almost fanatical focus. He used a simple bone needle and thread spun from common flax, his movements precise yet utterly devoid of the joy of creation. This was not creation. This was patching. This was holding back the inevitable decay of things, one stubborn stitch at a time. Through the single, small window of his workshop, paned with warped, greenish glass, the day was bleeding away. The long, lazy shadows of late afternoon stretched across the floor like grasping fingers. Soon, the first brave stars would appear in the vast canvas of the twilight sky. This was the moment Kaelen both dreaded and, in a secret, shameful corner of his soul, anticipated. A familiar, agonizing tightness would seize his chest, a phantom pain from a severed connection. He could still feel them up there, the celestial bodies he had helped to weave into being during his former life. Each one was not just a point of light, but a note in a silent, grand symphony, a vibration in the fabric of the cosmos. He remembered the feel of the loom of creation, the warmth of the star threads as they passed through his hands, the intoxicating rush of channeling pure light into a stable, burning form. He had been a singer in the choir of the universe. Now he was a man in a dusty room, mending a cloak. His current struggle, his entire existence, was defined by this mundanity. It was a struggle so far beneath his former glory that it was almost a divine mockery. Yet he clung to it. He applied himself to the darning of socks, the reinforcing of work trousers, the patching of leather aprons, with a desperate fervor. He believed, with the certainty of a zealot, that if he could just perfect this small, earthly craft, if he could make the perfect stitch achieve the most invisible repair, he could somehow earn a reprieve from the memory of his failure. The grand, soaring desire for creation that had once defined him had been replaced by a smaller, darker one, the desire for oblivion. He did not crave power or admiration. He craved the simple, unattainable peace of forgetting what he had been and the cataclysmic cost of his fall. He wanted the symphony of the stars to become mere background noise, and the weight of the cloak in his hands to be the only reality. The last of the sun's light faded, and a single brilliant point of light, the steadfast star of Elydian, winked into existence directly in his line of sight through the window. It seemed to look right at him. Kaelen's breath hitched. He looked down, away from that accusatory gaze, and focused on the rough texture of the wool. He finished the final stitch on the farmer's cloak, pulling the thread tight and snipping it with a pair of iron shears that felt leaden in his hand. The completed task brought no satisfaction, only the hollow acknowledgement that tomorrow would bring another just like it. This was his life now. This was the silence he had chosen. And as the stars multiplied outside, their silent songs a chorus to which he was forever deafened, the silence in the room grew, until it was the only thing he could hear. Section 2 of 30. A flicker in the firmament. The following evening, a change arrived not with a fanfare, but with a subtle wrongness that seeped into the world like a slow-acting poison. Kaelen was cleaning his tools, wiping the day's accumulation of wax, grime, and thread dust from his implements, a ritual of closure. The air in the workshop was still and warm, carrying the homely scents of beeswax and dried lavender he used to keep moths at bay. Then, without warning, a cold finger of wind slid through the ill-fitting frame of the window, extinguishing the single tallow candle on his workbench and plunging the room into near darkness, save for the starlight. This was no ordinary gust. It carried on it a scent that was utterly alien to Oakhaven's pastoral environment. A sharp, metallic tang, like ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with the cold, sterile smell of the void between worlds. It was the smell of Etheria. It was the smell of home. The scent was a ghost from his past, and it sent a jolt of simultaneous nostalgia and terror through his system. His head snapped up, his artist's eye, the one that still saw patterns and harmonies where others saw random specks, instinctively sought a fixed point in the celestial tapestry. He found it in the constellation of the Silver Lyre, a formation whose 7 primary stars he had personally tuned during his apprenticeship. He knew the precise vibrational frequency of each, the way their light should interact to create a chord of stability and guidance that influenced the tides of magic and dream in the mortal realm below. And there, at the Lyre's heart, where the brightest star, Lyra Prime, should have burned with a steady, unwavering white gold, something was wrong. The star didn't just twinkle atmospherically. It stuttered. Its light dimmed precipitously, as if a great hand had passed briefly in front of it. And when it flared back to life, its pure hue was tainted. A faint, sickly violet aura clung to it, a bruise upon the face of the night. It lasted only a second, perhaps 2, but to Kaelen's trained perception, it was an eternity of horror. A profound, metaphysical wrongness resonated through the core of his being. It was a sensation like no other. A discordant note played on the strings of reality itself, a tear in the sublime music of the spheres. This was not a natural phenomenon. This was a violation. This was a wound. He stood frozen, his cleaning rag forgotten in his hand, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his workbench. The familiar tightness in his chest was back. But it was different now. It wasn't the ache of loss. It was the cold grip of active dread. He was likely the only soul in all of Oakhaven, perhaps in all the surrounding kingdoms, who could perceive this event for what it was. To the shepherd looking up from his field, it would have been a curious flicker, soon forgotten. To the lover gazing at the stars, it would have been a trick of the eye. But to Kaelen, it was a scream in a language only he understood. It was a direct message, and the message was one of corruption and decay. Shaken to his very foundation, he took a step back, and his hip knocked against the small table where he kept his shears. The heavy, iron tools clattered to the stone floor, the sound jarringly loud and terrestrial, a stark anchor to the mundane world. The noise broke the spell. He bent down, his movements slow and stiff, to retrieve them. As his fingers closed around the cold, familiar metal, he tried to rationalize it. An atmospheric distortion, he whispered to the empty, dark room, his voice hoarse from disuse. A cloud of cosmic dust passing at a high altitude, a figment of a guilt-ridden imagination that sees failure in the very heavens. He said the words, but he did not believe them. The seed of dread had been planted in the fallow ground of his exile, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled his blood, that it would not remain dormant for long. The silence of his workshop was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet before the storm. Section 3 of 30, the echo of a fallen star. The next day, Kaelen moved through his tasks like a man made of glass, fragile and transparent, fearing that the slightest pressure would shatter the illusion of his normalcy. The memory of the flickering star was a splinter in his mind, festering with every passing hour. He found himself glancing skyward at odd moments, even in the bright light of day, as if he could see through the blue dome to the wounded constellations beyond. His work suffered. A stitch was misplaced. A measurement was off by a finger's breadth. Such errors were unheard of for him, and they felt like further proof that the stability of his exile was crumbling. The news, when it came, arrived not on a celestial wind, but on the earthy, gossip-laden breath of the village. It began as a low hum of excitement in the late afternoon. By the time Kaelen ventured out to the communal well to draw water, it was the sole topic of conversation. There had been a falling star of unparalleled brilliance the previous night, a spectacle that had set dogs howling and woken children from their sleep. Kaelen listened with a carefully constructed mask of mild curiosity, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. It was old Mabry, the shepherd, who delivered the crucial detail. She was seated on a bench outside the inn, her gnarled hands resting on her walking stick, her eyes milky with cataracts but her mind as sharp as a thorn. A small crowd had gathered around her, eager for her account. "Not like any shooting star I ever saw in all my born days," she croaked, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "I was out with the flock, feeling a bit restless. The sky, it felt heavy. Then I saw it. A tear of fire, yes, but it fell slow. Not a streak and a gone. It fell like a feather burnin' on its way down, like it were reluctant to land. And it didn't just wink out when it hit the world's edge." She paused for dramatic effect, leaning forward. "It landed, out near the edge of the Whispering Woods, due east of the old standing stone. I saw a glow there, a soft, pulsing light, like a heart beaten in the dirt. Sad it was, a right sad, lonely light." Her words struck Kaelen with the force of a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. A slow fall, a persistent, emotive glow. This was no meteor, no simple chunk of rock burning up in the atmosphere. This was a shard of a celestial body. It was a fragment of a wounded or dying star, a piece of cosmic consciousness that had broken away, containing a sliver of its essence, its final memories, its dying breath. They were rare, precious, and terribly dangerous things, sought after by foolish mages and coveted by dark forces. The inciting incident had arrived. It was not a royal summons or a dramatic proclamation. It was a rumor, a story told by an old woman. But to Kaelen, it was a direct, undeniable signal from the cosmos he had sworn to abandon. It was a cry for help from a creation he had once loved as his own child, a cry that had landed, literally, on his doorstep. The flicker in the sky was an alarm. The shard in the woods was the casualty that had fallen in his lap. The comfortable, self-pitying numbness of his exile shattered completely, replaced by a rising, cold tide of pure responsibility. He could not unknow this. He could not unsee the flicker or unhear Mabry's tale. The two events were connected, two symptoms of the same disease. A disease he, in his former life, had been sworn to fight. To ignore the shard was not just cowardice. It was a betrayal of the most sacred oath he had ever taken, an oath he had broken once before with catastrophic results. The walls of his small, quiet life were tumbling down, and he was standing in the rubble, exposed to the vast, demanding sky. Section 4 of 30, The Walls of Exile. The hours after hearing Mabry's account were a private battle, a war waged in the silent, cramped trenches of Kaelen's soul. He retreated to his workshop and barred the door, as if he could physically shut out the implications of the fallen shard. The familiar space, once his refuge, now felt like a cage. The tools of his mundane trade lay on the bench, accusing him of his small ambitions. The mended cloak, the patched boots. They seemed like pathetic, trivial things in the face of a dying star. His decision was a desperate, internal scream, repeated like a mantra against the rising panic. Do not go. Do not look. It is not your charge. It is not your failure to mend. He had built this life, this identity as the village mender, with painstaking care over the years. It was a fragile construct, and he knew that one step toward the Whispering Woods would bring it all crashing down. He was not a star weaver anymore. He was Kaelen the cobbler, the patcher, the man who kept to himself. That was the story he told himself, and he clung to it now with the strength of the drowning. He practiced his resistance through action. He threw himself into his work with a frenetic, almost violent energy. He took on every job he could find, not just the mending, but tasks he normally refused. Resoling a dozen pairs of worn-out boots, repairing a complex harness for the miller's donkey, even attempting to fix a music box for the innkeeper's daughter. a delicate mechanism that required a patience he did not possess. He worked until his back ached and his eyes stung from the poor light of the tallow candle, trying to bury his cosmic awareness under a mountain of mundane, tangible tasks. His interactions with the villagers during this time were a study in forced normalcy. Jovial Finn the baker stopped by with a loaf of yesterday's bread, offering it in exchange for a repaired apron. "Seen that Fallon star last night, Kaelen?" Finn asked, his face ruddy and cheerful. "Quite the sight. The wife says it's a sign of a good harvest. I say it's just a pretty light." Kaelen had merely grunted, his hands never stilling as he worked on the harness. "Just a rock," he managed to mutter, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. Later, Ilara, the farmer's wife whose cloak he had mended, came to collect it. Her face was lined with the very real, earthly worries of a failing crop and a sickly child. "Thank you, Master Kaelen," she said, her voice soft with genuine gratitude. "It's good as new. You're a blessing to this village." Her words were a dagger of irony to his heart. A blessing? He was a coward, hiding from his destiny while she faced hers with a courage he could not muster. Her simple, profound struggles, the need for food, the health of a loved one, were a stark contrast to the abstract, cosmic crisis he was trying to ignore. And yet, he knew they were connected. The stability of their world, the success of their harvest, the very dreams of Ilara's sick child, were all underpinned by the silent, steady music of the spheres. A music that was now falling out of tune. In the deep silence of the night, when his body was exhausted but his mind would not rest, the arguments raged. "You fell," the voice of his guilt whispered in the darkness. "You were not strong enough then. What makes you think you are strong enough now? The loom rejected you. The threads burned you. To answer that call is the height of arrogance. You will only fail again, and this time, the fall will not be to a quiet village, but into absolute oblivion. You will not just break yourself. You will extinguish the last ember of what you were." He built the walls of his exile higher, brick by brick, with these memories of his past catastrophe. He recalled the searing pain as the cosmic threads slipped from his control, the terrifying sound of reality tearing, the light of a newborn star going out before its time, and the profound, silent judgment of his peers. He had been cast out, yes, but his self-imposed exile was a harsher sentence than any they could have delivered. To go back was to face all of that again. And so he stayed, he stitched, he patched. He reinforced the walls and tried to ignore the beacon of sad, lonely light pulsing at the edge of the forbidden woods. Section 5 of 30, The Compulsion of Light. For 2 full days and nights, Kaelen held his resolve. He became a ghost in his own workshop, a silhouette against the candlelight scene late into the night, his hands moving ceaselessly, mechanically. He slept in fitful bursts, his dreams haunted by visions of dark, creeping tendrils snuffing out stars one by one, each extinction accompanied by a silent scream that was the Shard's and his own. He ate little. The bread from Finn sat uneaten on a shelf, a monument to the normal life he could no longer grasp. The call from the Whispering Woods was no longer a metaphorical concept. It had become a physical sensation, a psychic pull that was as undeniable as the tide. It was a dull, persistent ache behind his eyes, a humming in his bones that resonated with the Shard's dying pulse. It was a compass needle in his soul, and it pointed irrevocably east. On the dawn of the 3rd day, he looked at himself in the small, cracked shard of mirror he used for shaving. The face that stared back was haggard, the eyes shadowed and full of a haunted light. He looked, he realized, like a man being slowly devoured from the inside. The peace of his exile had been a lie. It was not peace, but stagnation. And now that stagnation was rotting. His decision to act was not a triumphant moment of heroic resolve. There was no clap of thunder, no sudden burst of courage. It was a quiet, desperate surrender. It was the act of a man who could no longer bear the internal conflict, who chose the certainty of external danger over the torture of his own conscience. It was born not of courage, but of an unbearable compulsion, the final breaking point of his will. He did not pack a hero's provisions. He took no sword, No shield, no stores of food for a long journey. He simply stood up from his workbench, leaving the half-repaired music box with its tiny, scattered gears. From a small, hidden compartment in the leg of his bed, he retrieved the only object that connected him to his past. His thimble. It was not silver, as he sometimes thought of it, but a metal that did not exist in this world, spun from starlight and mithril. It was cool to the touch, and though it was dull and scarred from its long disuse, it seemed to hum with a faint, familiar energy in his palm. Slipping it into the leather pouch on his belt, he took one last look around the workshop that had been his prison and his sanctuary. Under the cover of a deep pre-dawn gloom, when the world was holding its breath before the sun, he unbarred his door and stepped out. He did not walk with the purposeful stride of an adventurer setting out on a quest. His gait was that of a sleepwalker, a man haunted, drawn forward by an invisible leash. He moved through the sleeping village like a wisp of fog, past the dark windows and silent chimneys. At the edge of Oakhaven, where the well-trodden path gave way to a wilder track leading toward the dark, brooding line of the whispering woods, he paused. He looked back. The village was a cluster of silent, shapeless forms, safe in its ignorance. He was leaving behind the fragile peace of his self-pity, the comfort of his low expectations, the simple identity he had carved out of grief and failure. He was stepping away from the mended cloaks and the grateful smiles, away from the certainty of tomorrow's bread and the sound of the rain on his roof. He was stepping back toward the pain, toward the memory of light and his own catastrophic failure to maintain it, toward the vast, demanding responsibility he had forsaken. This was his true departure from normal, a journey not just into the physical wilderness of the whispering woods, but into the scarred and overgrown landscape of his own soul. Taking a deep, shuddering breath that did nothing to steady him, Kaelen turned his back on Oakhaven and took the first step into the unknown. Section 6 of 30, The Threshold of Whispers. The transition from the sun-dappled, if overgrown, path to the true interior of the whispering woods was as stark as stepping through a doorway into another world. One moment, Kaelen could hear the distant, fading call of a meadowlark from the fields behind him. The next, the sound was severed, replaced by a deep, living silence that was somehow louder than any noise. The air grew cool and still, heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the faint, sweet perfume of night-blooming fungi that clung to the roots of ancient, gargantuan trees. These were the old woods, their trunks so wide that 5 men with outstretched arms could not have encircled them, their canopies so dense they wove a perpetual twilight on the forest floor below. This was the new world, and its rules were unfamiliar and subtly hostile. The woods did not live up to their name through literal, audible whispers, at least not at first. The whispering was a psychic pressure, a faint, constant susurrus at the very edge of perception that felt like the forest itself was aware of his intrusion and was discussing it in a language of root and wind. It was a place that resisted straightforward travel. Paths seemed to shift when he blinked. A clearing he passed would seem to be in a different place when he glanced back. It was not outright malice, but the indifference of an ancient, powerful entity to a single, insignificant mortal. His destination, however, provided an unshakable beacon. The pull of the shard was stronger here, a clear, resonant hum in his blood that guided him like a lodestone, a straight line through the forest's deceptive geography. He followed it, his senses stretched taut, every rustle in the undergrowth making him flinch. He was a creature of the open cosmos, and this deep terrestrial womb felt claustrophobic, a reminder of all the worlds he was no longer connected to. Section 7 of 30, The Guardian of the Glade. After what felt like a day and a night of arduous, disorienting travel, though the light never changed, the psychic pull of the shard intensified from a hum to a resonant thrum, a chord plucked on the strings of his soul. The air itself began to vibrate, and the oppressive, watchful presence of the forest seemed to recede, replaced by a focused, potent energy emanating from directly ahead. Pushing through a final, defiant curtain of thick, black-thorned brambles that clutched and tore at his clothes and skin like desperate, bony fingers, Kaelen stumbled, bleeding and breathless, into a small, perfectly circular glade. The change was immediate and profound. The perpetual twilight of the woods was broken here. A single, slender shaft of actual sunlight, brilliant and golden, pierced the canopy high above and illuminated the center of the glade like a spotlight from the heavens. And there, cradled in a soft bed of moss that glowed with its own faint, blue-white luminescence, lay the shard. It was both less and more than he had imagined. It was not large, perhaps the size of his clenched fist, a jagged, irregular piece of what looked like crystalline material. But to call it crystal was to call a supernova a spark. It was composed of captured, solidified light, holding within its facets the essence of a star. It pulsed with that slow, rhythmic, sad, lonely light the shepherd Mabry had described, each beat a wave of soft, silver radiance that washed through the glade. The light was cold and clean, and it carried with it a profound sense of loss, a melody of a song that had been cut off mid-note. The air around it shimmered, not with heat, but with a protective, stabilizing energy that made the very space feel sacred. The forest's whispers were completely silent here. This was a place apart. This was the first challenge, and it manifested the moment he took a single, reverent step into the glade. There was a sound like old, dry wood groaning, and from the deep shadows at the base of the great tree anchoring the glade, something uncoiled. It was a woodraith, a guardian spirit of the forest, woven from the very substance of the woods themselves. It was a magnificent and terrifying sight, a being of gnarled bark, polished heartwood, and creeping, vibrant green vines. It stood on two trunk-like legs, and its upper limbs were long, articulated branches that ended in sharp, pointed tips. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, polished knot of ancient wood, giving it a blind, implacable appearance. It did not smell of decay, but of fresh sap, damp earth, and deep, patient time. It was not inherently evil. It was a custodian. It had been drawn to the shard's potent, alien energy, not as a threat, but as a wonder. It saw the shard as a strange, celestial seed, a gift from the sky that had to be protected from defilement, from being plucked and taken away before it could perhaps take root and become something new and wonderful for the forest. Kaelen, an outsider, an intruder with the clear intent to remove the seed, was the defiler. Kaelen froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. His old instincts, the reflexes of a star weaver, screamed for the power to command the fundamental forces. He yearned to reach out and unweave the creature, to command its vines to wither and its bark to splinter. But that power was a locked room in his soul, the key thrown away into the void of his failure. He was just a man. He had no weapon but the small eating knife at his belt, a pathetic tool against this elemental force. He slowly, carefully, raised his empty hands, palms outward, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I mean it no harm," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp in the sacred silence of the glade. The words felt inadequate, foolish. "I am here to help. It is wounded. I can feel it. I was a weaver. I can help." He put as much sincerity, as much desperate truth, into the words as he could. The woodraith did not respond to language. It saw in terms of intent, of energy, of action. It sensed his unwavering purpose to take the shard, and that purpose was a threat. It let out a low, grinding roar that seemed to come from the earth itself and lunged. It was not a move to kill, but to ensnare and immobilize. Its vine-like fingers, quick as striking snakes, shot out from its wrists, aiming to wrap around his legs and pull him to the ground, to root him to the spot as a warning to others. The first challenge was a test not of brute strength, but of worthiness, of adaptability, and of respect. Could he prove his purpose was pure and his right to the shard valid, without the godlike might he once wielded? The fight was on, a desperate dance of survival in a sun-dappled circle of moss and sorrowful light. Section 8 of 30, The Ember's Memory. The fight was a clumsy, brutal ballet, devoid of the grace that had once characterized his celestial workings. Kaelen was not a warrior. He was a craftsman, and his movements were those of desperate improvisation. He rolled over the soft moss, the thrum of the shard vibrating through the ground into his bones. He dodged the lashing vines, their thorns scraping his skin, and scrambled over roots, his muscles screaming in protest. He did not land a single offensive blow. He could not. His goal was not to defeat the Guardian, but to reach the prize it protected. He was not trying to win the fight, he was trying to win the moment. His chance came when the Woodwraith, overconfident from his apparent helplessness, committed to a powerful, sweeping grab. Kaelen dropped to his knees, letting the sharp-tipped branches whistle over his head, and then launched himself forward in a desperate, sprawling dive. His outstretched hand, the one that had once guided star threads onto the loom, closed over the cool, pulsating crystal of the shard. The moment his skin made contact, the glade, the Woodwraith, the forest, all of it dissolved into a searing, overwhelming torrent of pure experience. He was no longer Kaelen, the fallen weaver in a mortal wood. He was the star. He was Lyra Prime. He was vast. He was joy. The immense, crushing, beautiful pressure of fusion was the beat of his heart, a core of incandescent fire that had burned for 5 billion years. He sang a note of pure, white gold light, a steady, unwavering tone that was his name, his purpose, his essence. He was not alone. He was part of a family, the Silver Lyre. 6 other notes, each unique and brilliant, harmonized with his, their combined music creating a chord of stability, guidance, and wonder that rippled through the fabric of space-time, influencing the tides of magic and the substance of dreams in the mortal realm far below. He felt their presence like beloved siblings, their lights a comforting conversation that had lasted eons. Then the silence came. It did not have a name he could comprehend. The Umbral Veil was what he would later call it, but in the memory it was simply an unthing. It was not darkness, for darkness is the absence of light and can be filled. This was the absence of everything, of sound, of light, of concept. It was a hungry nullity that smothered. He felt it approach the constellation, a tide of cosmic anti-life. He felt his siblings, one by one, their brilliant songs cut short, not with a bang but a whimper, a final, silent shriek of terror as their light was not extinguished, but unmade, their very existence unraveled at the most fundamental level. The chord of the lyre was being broken, string by string. Then it was his turn. The silence touched him. The cold was not a temperature. It was the absolute zero of meaning. It was pain beyond physical sensation, an existential agony as his song was pulled apart, note by note. His light, his joy, his billion-year history were being systematically erased. He felt his consciousness fraying at the edges, dissolving into the void. In a final, desperate act of cosmic self-preservation, in the last microsecond before his core was snuffed out, he fractured. A piece of his essence, a shard containing the memory of his light, the echo of his song, and the searing brand of his death, was violently flung away, a spark ejected from a dying fire, cast across the light years to fall onto a world wrapped in a protective, living green mantle. Kaelen gasped, a raw, ragged sound, as he was violently thrown back into his own body. He was on his knees in the glade, clutching the shard to his chest, tears streaming uncontrollably down his face. His whole body racked with sobs that were not his own, but the stars. The grief was oceanic, the loss absolute. He had not just seen a memory, he had lived a death. The sad, lonely light was now a part of him, a ghost limb of a lost celestial body. When his vision cleared, he saw the Woodwraith. It had stopped its attack. It was standing perfectly still, its head-like not tilted, could sense the shift, could feel that the communion had taken place. The intruder was no longer just a thief. He was a vessel, now carrying the memory and the grief of the seed he held. With a slow, grinding creak, it took a step back. Then another. It did not retreat in defeat, but in a kind of solemn acknowledgement. It melted back into the deep shadows of the glade's edge, becoming one with the tree from whence it came, its duty of protection now complete in a way it had not anticipated. This was the small victory. He had secured the shard. He had survived the Guardian. He had learned the terrible, magnificent truth of its origin. He held in his hand not an object, but a tombstone and a soul fragment. A grim, fiery determination settled in the cold pit of his stomach. He could do this. He would find a way to restore this shard. Section 9 of 30, The Price of Starlight. The victory in the glade was a fleeting illusion, a calm eye in a hurricane that was now closing in around him. The moment he tucked the shard safely into the leather pouch on his belt, shielding its direct light with his body, the entire atmosphere of the forest shifted again. The sacred silence of the glade was swallowed by a new, active malevolence. The psychic whispering, which had been a background hum of judgment, sharpened into a chorus of clear, focused hostility. The deeper conflict was no longer a test from a territorial guardian. It was an existential assault from a force that wanted him, and the shard, erased. The Umbral Veil, whose presence he had felt as a profound, consuming nothingness in the star's memory, had left a taint on the shard. It was a psychic residue, a scent of absolute nullity that clung to the fragment of light like a predator's musk. And in the deep, light-starved places of the Whispering Woods, that scent was a beacon, drawing the Veil's lesser, hunting minions. They came from the places where the canopy was thickest, where the green twilight deepened into near blackness. They were the Shadestalkers. They were not creatures of flesh and blood, nor of spirit like the Woodraith. They were something else entirely, patches of manifested entropy, fragments of the Veil given a predatory semi-autonomous will. They were living darkness, not the absence of light, but its active annihilation. They had no defined shape, flowing like ink dropped in water, but they congealed into forms that suggested multi-limbed predators, with trailing, insubstantial tendrils and core. Section 10 of 30, An Unlikely Sanctuary. The wave of despair was a physical weight, threatening to lock his joints and still his heart. The Shadestalkers did not move with speed, but with an inexorable, gliding certainty, as if time itself was slowing down in their presence. The vibrant green ferns they passed over turned a brittle, ashen gray, crumbling into dust. The sound of their movement was the faintest sigh of entropy, a promise of the final cold silence that awaited all things. Kaelen scrambled backward, his boots slipping on the soft loam, his breath pluming in the suddenly frigid air. He was trapped against a great, mossy wall of intertwined roots, the dead end of the path the forest had deceitfully provided for him. This was the true face of the antagonist, the opposing force made manifest. It was not a singular being to be reasoned with, but a fundamental law of decay given hunger and intent. Its goal was not to defeat him, but to unmake him, to subtract his story from the grand narrative of existence. The shard in his pouch flared with a last, desperate pulse of silver light, a final act of defiance against the closing dark. Just as the lead stalker, a swirling vortex of shadows with two pinpricks of absolute void that served as eyes, reached a talon tendril for his face, a new light bloomed. It was not the cold, sorrowful silver of the shard, nor the muted green of the forest. This was a warm, golden, living light. It erupted from a point to his left, a sudden and shocking dawn in the perpetual twilight. It was the light of a well-tended hearth, of ripe wheat in the sun, of honey and amber. The shaft of brilliance cut through the gathering gloom, and where it touched the Shadestalkers, they recoiled with a sound like ice cracking under immense pressure. They did not vanish, but they writhed, their forms becoming less substantial, their advance halted by this anathema to their nature. Kaelen, his vision blurring with terror and exhaustion, turned his head toward the source. There, where a moment before there had been only impassable forest, stood a solitary ancient oak, its bark silvered with age. And nestled within its massive, sheltering roots, as if the tree had grown specifically to cradle it, was a small, sturdy cottage built of stone and weathered timber. The golden light spilled from its diamond-paned windows, and the very air around the structure hummed with a protective, nurturing energy. A sphere of safety, a bastion against the void. The cottage door creaked open, and a figure stood silhouetted against the radiant interior. It was a woman. She was not young, nor was she ancient. Her age seemed as fluid as the forest's own. She wore simple, practical clothes of homespun wool, and her hair, the color of dark walnut, was streaked with silver and tied back in a loose braid. In one hand, she held a wooden staff, from the top of which hung a lantern of clear crystal, containing the source of the brilliant golden light, a captured, self-sustaining fragment of a sunbeam, a feat of magic that was humble yet profound. Her eyes, as she looked past Kaelen to the hissing stalkers, held not fear, but a firm, unwavering resolve. "Inside, quickly," she commanded, her voice clear and resonant, carrying an authority that brooked no argument. "They cannot abide the hearthlight, but their patience is deeper than the roots of the mountains." Gasping, his legs trembling with the last of his adrenaline, Kaelen did not hesitate. He pushed himself away from the root wall and stumbled across the clearing. As he crossed the invisible threshold where the golden light held dominion, the oppressive, soul-chilling cold of the stalkers vanished, replaced by a warmth that seeped into his very bones. He glanced back once, from the safety of the doorway, and saw the shade-stalkers circling at the edge of the light, their formless shapes coalescing and dissolving in frustrated rage, like wolves kept at bay by a mighty fire. He stepped inside, and the woman shut the door firmly behind him, sliding a heavy wooden bolt into place. The sounds of the forest, the whispers, the hissing, the sigh of entropy, were instantly muted. He stood, trembling and filthy, in the main room of the cottage. It was a single, spacious area, dominated by a large stone hearth where a real fire crackled cheerfully. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of dried herbs, roots, and luminescent fungi. Bunches of hanging flowers and braided garlic filled the air with a clean, earthy scent. A simple table and 2 chairs sat near the fire, and a ladder led to a sleeping loft above. It was a place of order, peace, and powerful, grounded magic. "I am Lyra," the woman said, turning to face him. Her gaze was direct, assessing, and missed no detail, from the torn state of his clothes to the way his hand instinctively went to the pouch containing the shard. "You have brought a great danger to my door, Walker." Section 11 of 30, The Hearth of a Sunsinger. The warmth of the cottage was not merely a comfort. It was a baptism. It washed over Kaelen, seeping into muscles clenched for days with fear and exhaustion. The simple, solid reality of the room, the scent of drying thyme and burning oak, the flickering dance of firelight on rough-hewn beams, was an anchor in the surreal storm he had been navigating. For a long moment he just stood there, swaying slightly, his hand still pressed protectively over the pouch that held the shard. The transition from the predatory silence of the stalkers to this vibrant, humming sanctuary was too abrupt for his frayed nerves to process. Lyra moved with a quiet, efficient grace, ignoring his stunned state. She hung her sun lantern staff on a hook by the door, where it continued to cast its gentle, unwavering glow. She went to the hearth, took a heavy iron kettle from its hook, and filled it from a ceramic pitcher. "Sit," she repeated, her tone not unkind, but firm, the voice of one accustomed to being obeyed within these walls. "You'll have tea, and then you will tell me what you have brought into my woods." The command broke his paralysis. He stumbled to the offered chair, its wood worn smooth by years of use, and sank into it, his body feeling impossibly heavy. He watched her as she prepared the tea, her movements economical and sure. This was her magic, he realized. Not the grand, cosmic weaving of light he had once practiced, but a deep-rooted craft. The hearth fire, the sun lantern, the carefully preserved herbs, they were all testaments to a power that nurtured, protected, and sustained. A power that worked with the world, not upon it from a distance. He felt a pang of something akin to shame for the arrogant, detached art he had once mastered. She brought 2 clay mugs to the table, setting one before him. The steam carried the scent of chamomile, lavender, and something else. A sharp, clean note of a silver-tongue root, known for its properties of clarity and truth-speaking. He understood the message. He wrapped his hands around the mug, the heat a grounding sensation against his palms. "My name is Kaelen," he began, his voice rough. "I know what you are," Lyra interrupted gently, sipping her own tea. Her eyes, the color of rich soil after a rain, held his. Or what you were. The stars are woven into the lines of your hands, and the void of your failure hangs about you like a shroud. But that is the past. I need to know about the now. What is that thing in your pouch that sings such a sad song and draws the eaters of silence to my home? The directness of her question, and her perception, left him no room for evasion. He took a deep breath and began to speak. He told her of the flicker in the lyre, of Mabry's tale, of his journey into the woods and the confrontation with the Woodraith. And then, haltingly, his voice dropping to a whisper, he described the memory vision, the life and death of Lyra Prime, the chilling approach of the Umbral Veil, the unmaking of an entire constellation. As he spoke, he saw the professional calm on her face shift to a deep, grim understanding. When he finished, the cottage was silent save for the crackling of the fire. Lyra stared into the flames, her expression troubled. The eaters have been more active these past few seasons, she murmured. The woods have been anxious. I thought it was a natural cycle, a balancing. She looked back at him, her gaze sharp. This is not natural. What you describe is a sickness in the cosmos itself. She reached out, not for his pouch, but gesturing for him to place the shard on the table. After a moment's hesitation, he did so. The fragment of star pulsed its soft, sorrowful light against the rough grain of the wood. Lyra did not touch it, but passed her hand over it, her eyes closed. So much pain, she whispered. And the taint, it is a seed of nothingness. It should not be. She opened her eyes. You cannot stay here long, Kaelen. The hearthlight will hold them for a time, but it is a barrier, not a weapon. Their presence will weaken it, and their patience is infinite. They will not leave as long as this shard is here. The relationship growth had begun, not with friendship, but with a shared recognition of a dire threat. They were allies of circumstance, a celestial refugee and a terrestrial guardian, united by a common enemy that threatened the very fabric of their respective worlds. The sanctuary was real, but it was temporary, and the clock was now ticking. Section 12 of 30, The Weave of Earth and Sky. The night passed in a tense, watchful quiet. Kaelen slept fitfully on a pallet by the fire, his dreams a chaotic jumble of dying starlight and the silent, patient circling of the stalkers just beyond the windows. Lyra did not sleep at all. He would wake to see her standing at the door, her hand on her sun lantern staff, her lips moving in a silent chant that seemed to reinforce the golden light emanating from her home. At the first hint of gray dawn filtering through the canopy, a light that was still dim and weak compared to Lyra's own, she roused him. The light is strongest now at the turning of the day, she said, her face drawn but resolute. We must use this time. I cannot help you with your celestial quest, Starweaver. That is a path you must walk alone. But I can try to teach your sorrowful little friend a new song, or at least, help it remember its own more clearly. This was the mystery or twist. Lyra's plan was not to fight the stalkers directly, nor to attempt the impossible task of rekindling the shard with his lost celestial power. Her approach was subtler, born of her deep connection to the living earth. She believed that the wound of the shard, the taint of the Umbral Veil, could be soothed, its progress slowed, by grounding its energy in the vibrant, life-saturated magic of the forest. She led him to a small, hidden chamber at the back of the cottage, a room he had not noticed before. It was not a room built of stone and wood, but a natural grotto the great oak's roots had formed. In the center was a small, clear spring that bubbled up from the earth, its water shimmering with a faint, innate luminescence. Mosses of incredible green softness covered the roots, and tiny, star-like white flowers bloomed in the perpetual damp. This is a heart spring, Lyra explained, her voice hushed with reverence. A place where the lifeblood of the world is close to the surface. The song is one of pure, persistent being. We will bathe your shard in its waters. It will not heal the unmaking, but it may cleanse the memory. Strengthen the light that remains against the echo of the dark. It was a concept foreign to Kaelen. His art was one of addition, of building up light and energy into grand structures. Hers was one of nurturing, of cleansing, of reminding something of what it truly was. He watched, fascinated and skeptical, as she took the shard and, with a prayer to the spirit of the spring, gently submerged it in the pool. The effect was immediate. The shard's sad, silver light flared, not with pain, but with what seemed like relief. The water around it swirled, and for a moment, Kaelen felt not the death cry of the star, but a faint, steady pulse that resonated with the deep, slow heartbeat of the world itself. The sickly violet aura that had clung to its edges since his vision seemed to fade, just a little, like a stain lifting from cloth. It was a temporary measure, a bandage on a mortal wound, but it was something. It was an act of defiance that used life, not power. This new information changed his understanding of the conflict entirely. The Umbral Veil was a cosmic blight, but it could be resisted, however temporarily, by terrestrial strength. The solution was not necessarily to be found in the lonely heights of the cosmos, but perhaps in the connected, living heart of the world. It was a revelation that humbled him further and gave him a fragile, new kind of hope. Section 13 of 30, The Cost of Sanctuary. The respite was brief. As the day wore on, the Shadestalkers did not disperse. If anything, their presence grew stronger, a gathering gloom at the edges of the clearing. The golden hearthlight, which had blazed so confidently the night before, now seemed to be under a constant, pressing assault. It didn't flicker, but its area of influence slowly, imperceptibly, began to shrink. The air inside the cottage grew colder, and the cheerful crackle of the fire was now accompanied by the faint, ever-present sigh of the stalkers, a sound that seeped through the stone walls like groundwater. Lyra grew paler, lines of strain etching themselves around her eyes and mouth. Maintaining the barrier was costing her. She moved between the heartspring, where the shard now rested, and the main room, reinforcing the wards with whispered songs and handfuls of sacred herbs cast into the fire. Kaelen felt a profound helplessness. He was a liability. His presence, and the shard he carried, was draining the strength of the one person who had offered him refuge. That evening, the moral test arrived. Lyra was seated by the fire, her brow beaded with sweat despite the chill, when she suddenly swayed in her chair. Kaelen caught her before she could fall. "This cannot continue," she said, her voice thin. "Another night, perhaps two, and the light will fail. They will come for the shard. And for us." Kaelen knew she was right. The choice before him was starkly clear. He could stay, relying on Lyra's protection until it broke, condemning them both for the sake of the shard. Or he could leave, take the shard and draw the stalkers away from her, back into the depths of the woods, saving her but almost certainly dooming himself. It was a choice between a shared, certain death or a solitary, probable one. It was a test of his values, revealing that his desire for redemption did not extend to sacrificing an innocent for his cause. "There is another way," Lyra said, as if reading his thoughts. Her eyes were fierce. A diversion. I can create a burst of hearthlight, a false beacon of pure, nurturing energy. For a few hours, it would shine brighter than the shard, drawing the stalkers to it. It would give you a window to escape, to get far from here. She paused, and the cost of this plan was written plainly on her face. But to create it, I would have to pour most of my own life force into the sun lantern. I would be left, diminished, vulnerable. It would take me years to recover my strength. The moral dilemma deepened, becoming a chasm. He could save himself by allowing her to cripple herself. It was a lesser evil than both of them dying, but it felt like a profound betrayal. He would be using her sacrifice to fuel his own quest, becoming indebted in a way he could never repay. His flaw, the pride that had caused his fall and the selfish desire for personal redemption, warred with the burgeoning sense of responsibility he felt towards this woman who had shown him nothing but courage. "I cannot ask that of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did not ask," she replied softly. "I offer. This is my woods, Kaelen, my charge, to protect it and the life within it, even from threats that fall from the sky. Your quest is now part of my duty, but you must decide. Now, Section 14 of 30, the kindling of sacrifice. The silence in the cottage was heavier than any he had known, thick with the weight of the decision and the relentless pressure from outside. Kaelen looked at Lyra, at the fierce, selfless determination in her weary eyes, and he saw a courage that shamed his own self-pitying exile. She was willing to burn her own vitality to embers for a chance, however small, to protect her world. His own fall had been about a failure of power. Hers would be a testament to the strength of sacrifice. He could not let her do it. Not like this. Not while he stood by and did nothing. No, he said, the word firm and clear, surprising even himself. There is another path. We do it together. He stood up, his mind, for the first time since his fall, working not with the grand, complex patterns of cosmic weaves, but with a simple, desperate clarity. The false beacon is a good plan, but you will not fuel it alone. He pointed to the shard, still pulsing in the heartspring. You use earth magic to nurture and cleanse. I was trained to channel raw power. The shard still holds a vast amount of energy, the last dregs of a star. It is a sorrowful energy, a dying energy, but it is potent. Let me be the conduit. Let me channel its power into your lantern. Lyra stared at him, aghast. That is madness. You would mix the light of a dead star with the lifelight of the world. The energies are antithetical. It could shatter the lantern, or worse, create an explosion that would tear my home apart. It is a risk, he admitted, his heart pounding. But is it a greater risk than you being left defenseless? My art was about harmony, about finding the resonance between different lights. I failed once on a scale you cannot imagine, but I remember the principles. I can try to find the note, the frequency, that allows the shard's energy to be translated into a form your hearthlight can use. I will not force it. I will ask it. This was his renewed drive, born not from a desire for personal redemption, but from the need to protect someone else. His goal was refined. It was no longer just about saving the shard, but about using the tool of his past failure to enable an act of present courage. He would not run. He would stand and fight, with the only weapons he had left. His knowledge, his frayed connection to the stars, and his new, fragile alliance. Lyra studied his face, looking past the fear and into the desperate sincerity. She saw the ghost of the weaver he had been, not in his power, but in his intent. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. We will try it your way. She unhooked her sun lantern staff and placed it on the table between them. But know this, Kaelen. If you harm the hearthlight, you will have extinguished one of the last true bastions of warmth in these darkening woods. The cost of failure is more than your life. The stakes were now higher than ever. He was not just gambling with his own soul, but with the very sanctuary that had saved him. He took a deep breath, reached into the heartspring, and lifted the shard. It felt different in his hand, cooler, calmer, but the immense power within it was still there, a sleeping giant of grief and light. He looked at Lyra, then at the lantern. The final preparations were made. The plan was set. The tension in the cottage was now a bowstring drawn taut, ready to launch them into the night. Section 15 of 30, the conjunction of lights. The moment of truth arrived as full night fell. The shadestalkers pressed in, their forms a solid wall of swirling darkness against the cottage's golden glow, which had now shrunk to a thin, brilliant shell around the structure. The sighing was a constant, maddening drone. Lyra stood at the door, her hands on her staff, which was laid across two forked stands, pointing towards the Heartspring Grotto. Her eyes were closed, her face a mask of concentration as she held the core of the hearthlight steady. Kaelen knelt before the heartspring, the shard held in his cupped hands. His thimble was on his thumb, a conduit he had not dared to use in years. He closed his eyes, pushing past the terror, the memory of his failure, the fear of harming Lyra's light. He reached not for the power to command, but for the sensitivity to listen. He sent his awareness into the shard, not as a master, but as a supplicant. He felt the star's grief, vast and cold. But beneath it, thanks to Lyra's spring, he also felt a new thread, a fragile connection to the living earth, a memory of what it was to be part of a whole. He focused on that thread. He poured his own intention into it, not a demand but a request. A vision of Lyra's courage, of the warm, golden light, of the need for a diversion to protect this small, precious place. "Help us," he whispered in his mind, across the gulf of species and substance. "Your song was one of guidance and stability. Let it guide one more time. Let it stabilize this one small point of light against the dark. Do not let your death be for nothing." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then he felt it. A shift, a reluctant, sorrowful agreement. The shard's energy, which had been a closed, mournful knot, began to slowly, carefully unravel. It was not a violent release, but a gentle exhalation. A stream of pure, silver starfire, tinged with blue grief, flowed from the shard, up his arm, and into the thimble. The pain was excruciating. It was not the burning pain of overload, but the heart-wrenching pain of channeling a dirge. He was a pipe through which a funeral song was being played. He gritted his teeth, focusing all his will on the second, impossible part of the task: translation. He turned his attention to the sun lantern. He felt its warm, golden, living frequency, a song of growth and nurture. The starfire was a song of cold, distant grandeur and tragic end. They were dissonant, clashing. He could feel the lantern's structure straining, the crystal beginning to vibrate with a dangerous pitch. Lyra gasped, feeling the disturbance in her connection. Harmony, he thought desperately. His consciousness stretched between the two alien energies. Not sameness, resonance. Find the note they share. He searched, sifting through the frequencies, and he found it. It was not a note of joy or life, but a note of persistence. The stubborn will of a star to burn for billions of years, and the stubborn will of a hearthfire to burn through the night. The will to exist, the defiance of silence. He focused on that single fundamental note and channeled the shard's energy through it. The result was breathtaking. The sun lantern did not explode. It flared, but the light that erupted from it was not gold, nor was it silver. It was a brilliant, blinding white, shot through with threads of gold and faint, echoing blue. It was a new light, conjured light. It blasted through the walls of the cottage not as a solid barrier, but as a wave of pure, defiant existence. Outside, the shadestalkers recoiled as if scalded. Their forms writhed and frayed at the edges. This was not a light they could simply wait out. It was a light that actively repelled their nothingness. With a chorus of silent, frustrated screams, they dissolved back into the deeper shadows of the forest, retreating from this unexpected, potent beacon. Inside, the wave of light subsided, settling back into the lantern, which now glowed with a steady, powerful white light, its golden hue permanently altered. Kaelen collapsed to the floor, the shard dark and dormant in his hand, every ounce of his energy spent. Lyra stumbled away from the door, her face awestruck as she looked at her transformed staff. They had done it. They had created a diversion, a shield of unimaginable strength. But as Kaelen lay on the cool stone floor, gasping for air, he knew the rising stakes. They had not defeated the stalkers. They had only revealed a new, more powerful way to resist them. And in doing so, they had undoubtedly drawn the attention of whatever intelligence commanded them. The Umbral Veil would now know that the fallen Weaver and the Sunsinger were not just prey, but a genuine threat. The hunt was far from over. It had just become infinitely more dangerous. Section 16 of 30. The Cost of Conjunction. The aftermath of the conjured light was a silence that felt earned, a fragile peace purchased with sheer, exhausted will. Kaelen lay on the cool stone of the grotto floor, his body a hollowed-out vessel. Every muscle trembled with a profound fatigue that went beyond the physical. It was a depletion of his very spirit. Channeling the shard's dying song had been like trying to hold a river of grief inside a cup. He could still feel the echo of it, a cold silver ache in his bones. The shard itself, now resting beside him, was dim, its rhythmic pulse stilled into a dormant, crystalline sleep. He had not just used its energy. He had asked it to give its very essence, and it had complied, leaving it a near lifeless husk. Lyra was in a state of quiet, reverent shock. She stood over her sun lantern staff, which was now anchored in the center of the main room. Its light no longer a warm gold but a steady, brilliant white, humming with a potent, hybrid energy. She passed a hand near the crystal, not touching it, her expression a mixture of awe and trepidation. "It's changed," she whispered, her voice raw. "The hearth light is still there. I can feel its warmth at the core, but it's wrapped in something else, something sharper, stronger. It's a shield now, not just a ward." She looked at Kaelen, her eyes wide. "What did we do?" "We survived," Kaelen rasped, pushing himself up onto his elbows. The world swam nauseatingly. "We gave them a reason to fear the light. But the cost was evident. The cottage was safe, encased in a barrier far stronger than before, but Lyra's connection to it was altered. It was no longer solely her creation. It was now partly his and partly the shard's. A piece of the dead star was now woven into the fabric of her home. The sanctuary was secure, but it was no longer purely a place of terrestrial nurture. It had been forever marked by the celestial and the tragic. For 3 days, they did not speak of what came next. They rested. Kaelen slept a deep, dreamless sleep, his body and mind slowly knitting themselves back together. Lyra tended to her transformed home, learning the new frequencies of her light, finding that she could now push back the forest's twilight for a dozen paces beyond her door. The very plants at the edge of this new influence seeming to stand a little taller, their green a little brighter. It was a victory, but it was a strange, unsettling one. They had not just defended, they had mutated the nature of the defense. The rising stakes were now personal. The veil had been thwarted, and the weapon used against it was a fusion of their very beings. They were no longer just targets. They were architects of a new resistance, and that made them a priority. Section 17 of 30. The Earth's Complaint. On the 4th morning, the forest itself told them the respite was over. Lyra, who communicated with the woods through a language of root and wind, awoke with a start, her face pale. "The earth is sickening," she said, her breakfast untouched. "The blight isn't just following you, Kaelen. It's spreading. The stalkers you drove off didn't leave the woods. They're festering in the deep places, and their silence is poisoning the streams, withering the heartwood of the oldest trees. The whispering woods are falling silent." She led him to the heartspring. The water, which had been crystal clear and luminescent, now had a faint, oily sheen. The luminescent mosses at its edge were spotted with gray, and the star-like flowers had closed their petals, drooping towards the earth. The shard, even in its dormant state, seemed to draw the taint towards it like a magnet. "This cannot stand," Lyra said, her voice hard with a resolve Kaelen had not heard before. "I am a guardian of this life. I cannot sit behind my walls while the woods I am sworn to protect die around me." She turned to him, her decision made. "Your quest is no longer just about the stars, Starweaver. It is about this world. The veil is here, and we must find its source." This was the midpoint crisis. The mission was no longer about saving a single shard or finding personal redemption. The discovery that the Umbral Veil was actively corrupting the terrestrial world changed everything. It was not a distant celestial tragedy. It was an immediate, existential threat to the very ground beneath their feet. The passive goal of survival was replaced by an active one. They had to go on the offensive. They had to find the heart of the blight and sever it, or watch two worlds, the celestial and the terrestrial, succumb to the same creeping nothingness. The safe haven was now a base for a war they had to wage. Section 18 of 30. The Weeping Cartographer. To find the source, they needed a guide. The forest's natural disorientation was now compounded by the veil's corrupting influence, making Lyra's innate sense of the woods unreliable. She spoke of a reclusive being, a cartographer of sorts, who mapped not with ink and parchment, but with memory and song. The last leaf, she called him, an ancient, sentient tree who held the memory of every path, every stream, every stone in the woods since the first acorn sprouted. If the veil had a focal point, a place where it was strongest, he would know. Finding him was a journey in itself. They traveled for a day, the transformed light of Lyra's staff creating a small, safe bubble around them as they moved. The woods grew older and stranger, the trees becoming like living pillars of forgotten time. They found the last leaf in a secluded valley, a colossal oak whose bark was etched with patterns that looked like shifting maps. But the great tree was ailing. Its leaves, which should have been a vibrant green, were tinged with the same sickly violet as the corrupted star. Sap, thick and black like tar, wept from fissures in its bark. Lyra approached, placing her hands on the tree's trunk and humming a low, soothing melody. The tree shuddered. A face, ancient and noble, formed in the swirls of the bark. Its voice was the sound of a forest sighing. The songless one digs its roots deep, sun singer. It drinks from the well of forgotten things, at the place where the sky tear fell. An image, projected directly into their minds by the tree, showed a location deep within the woods. A jagged crater, not of rock, but of twisted, petrified wood and blackened earth. At its center was not the shard Kaelen carried, but a larger, darker fragment. A piece of the Umbral Veil itself, a shard of anti-creation that had fallen with the star, acting as an anchor and a conduit poisoning the land. The sky tier was not just the shard of light, but also a shard of darkness. This was the mystery or twist that changed everything. The enemy was not an abstract force in the sky. It was here. It had a physical foothold in the world, a beachhead from which it was spreading its corruption. And it had fallen with the star, a parasitic twin. The battle was no longer out there. It was right here, in the heart of the Whispering Woods. Section 19 of 30, The Unmaking of a Weaver. The revelation struck Kaelen with the force of a physical blow. The veil wasn't just an external force. It had a tangible presence, and it had arrived because of him. Or more precisely, because of the star he had failed. The memory of Lyra Prime's death replayed in his mind, but now he saw it with new eyes. The veil hadn't just unmade the star. It had consumed a part of it, taken a piece of that nothingness and sent it crashing into the world below, a seed of oblivion. His guilt, which had been a dull, constant companion, now sharpened into a razor of self-loathing. He fell to his knees, not in prayer, but in despair. "This is my doing," he choked out, the words tearing at his throat. "My failure in the heavens. It has poisoned your world. I have brought the plague to your door." Lyra watched him, her expression not of accusation, but of pity and fierce understanding. "Look at me, Kaelen," she commanded. He forced his eyes to meet hers. "The fall of the star was a tragedy, but the veil is the aggressor. It is the sickness. You are not the plague. You are a physician who once lost a patient. And now that same disease is threatening another. Will you lie down and let it win because of your guilt? Or will you stand up and use your knowledge to fight it?" This was his inner revelation, forced upon him not in a moment of quiet contemplation, but in the face of undeniable consequence. His past failure was a fact, a scar on his soul. But it did not have to be his definition. Redemption was not about erasing the past. It was about what you built from its ruins. Lyra was not asking him to be the weaver he once was. She was asking him to be the man he was now, a man who had held a dying star's memory, who had helped forge a new light, and who understood the enemy better than anyone. He saw the blighted tree, the weeping cartographer. He saw Lyra's unwavering resolve. His goal was no longer the selfish one of cleansing his own name. It was the necessary one of protecting what remained. He had to do it not because he was a star weaver, but because he was a man who had been shown kindness and had seen the cost of inaction. He stood up, the weight of his guilt still there, but now borne as a burden of responsibility, not a chain of shame. His renewed drive was born. "We find the crater," he said, his voice steady for the first time since his fall. "We find this shard of darkness, and we unmake it." Section 20 of 30, The Pact of Root and Star. The decision made, There was no more time for hesitation. The blight was spreading, and the last leaf's strength was fading. Under the dim light of the corrupted forest, Kaelen and Lyra forged their pact. It was not sworn on gold or parchment, but on the elements that defined them. Lyra went to the heartspring, now tainted but still holding the memory of its purity. She filled a small, hollowed-out gourd with its water. By the living earth that nourishes and the water that flows through all things, I swear to see this through, to cleanse the blight or be consumed by it. She drank. Kaelen took the dormant shard from his pouch. It was cool and lifeless. He placed his thimble upon it. By the light that is memory, and the memory that is a promise, I swear it. By the silent song of Lyra Prime, I will face the darkness that unmade it. I will fight not for my past, but for this world's future. A faint, final flicker of silver light pulsed within the shard, a seal of agreement, before it went dark once more. They gathered what they needed. Lyra took herbs for cleansing and healing, and her staff, the beacon of their conjured light. Kaelen carried only the dormant shard and his thimble. They left the safety of the cottage, the white light of the staff pushing back the oppressive gloom. The forest around the cottage was still mostly healthy, but as they moved in the direction the last leaf had shown them, the signs of decay accelerated. The air grew colder, the colors leached from the flora, and the psychic whispers of the woods were replaced by a dead, hollow silence. This was the countdown to climax. They were moving deliberately towards the enemy's heart. Every step was a step into a landscape being actively unmade. The tension was a physical thing, a tightening coil in the air. They did not speak. They didn't need to. Their pact was their bond. A weaver of stars and a singer of the sun, walking together into the belly of the beast, their fates, and the fate of the woods, now inextricably linked. All roads led to the crater, to the final confrontation that would decide everything. Section 21 of 30, The Descent into Unsong. The journey toward the crater was a pilgrimage into a land of the dead, a place where the concept of life was being systematically revoked. The vibrant, whispering sentience of the Whispering Woods was the first thing to die. It didn't fade. It was severed, as if a great blade had fallen, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure against the eardrums. This was not the peaceful quiet of a snow-blanketed field or the respectful hush of a sacred grove. This was the silence of a vacuum, the silence of a grave after the mourners have left, a hollow, echoing void that actively rejected sound. Their own footsteps, which should have crunched on leaves or squelched in mud, were muffled, the forest floor itself having become a spongy, gray substance that absorbed noise and vibration alike. The very air grew thin and stale, bereft of the complex symphony of scents that defined a living forest, leaving only the flat, metallic tang of ozone and the faint, sickly sweet odor of decay, like rotten honey. The light from Lyra's staff, their conjured bastion of white gold energy, seemed to struggle here. It did not blaze forth as it had near her cottage, but was forced into a tight, defensive sphere around them, perhaps 10 paces across. Beyond its edge, the world was rendered in a palette of monochrome despair. The trees were not just blighted, they were transforming. Their bark was sloughing off in great, ashen sheets, revealing wood beneath that was not wood, but a brittle, petrified material the color of bone. Their branches, stripped of leaves, clawed at a sky that was no longer visible through a ceiling of gray, cobweb-like moss that hung from the canopy. There were no insects, no birds, not even the scuttling of a beetle in the detritus. The shadestalkers were absent, too, but their presence was felt more strongly than ever. This entire domain was now their body. The blight was their collective exhalation. Kaelen felt the wrongness on a level that transcended his 5 senses. It was a nausea of the soul. His connection to the cosmos, though severed and atrophied, was still a part of him, a fundamental aspect of his being like a phantom limb. And here, in this place, he felt the universe itself had awound. The natural background hum of creation, the faint, comforting resonance that all things possessed, was gone. It had been replaced by a null frequency, a standing wave of anti-energy that made his teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. He was a creature of light and song trapped in a place that defined itself by the absence of both. Lyra fared no better, though her suffering was of a different nature. She was a creature of the living earth, and to her, this was not just a blighted landscape. It was a dying relative. She walked with a hand pressed to her chest, as if physically heartsick. Her connection to the woods, which had always been a source of strength and guidance, was now a conduit for pure agony. She could feel the last, fading whispers of the trees as their consciousness was unmade, their long, patient memories dissolving into static. She could feel the poison seeping through the mycelial networks, turning the world's vibrant, communicative web into a lattice of death. Every step was a torment. "This is worse than I imagined," she whispered, her voice a fragile thing in the consuming silence. "It's not just killing the forest. It's unwriting it. It's making it so that it never was." Kaelen nodded grimly, his hand resting on the pouch that held the dormant shard. "The Umbral Veil doesn't destroy, consumes context. It erases meaning. A star is not just a ball of fire. It is a note in a song, a point in a story. The veil consumes the story and leaves only the inert matter, which then crumbles. It is doing the same here." They were approaching the enemy, not just a physical location, but the very epicenter of this ontological cancer. The path, what little there was of one, began to slope downward, a gentle but undeniable descent that felt like walking into a giant open mouth. The air grew colder still, and a faint, keening wind began to blow, though it stirred none of the gray moss or the petrified branches. It was a wind that seemed to blow from nowhere, carrying with it the psychic residue of forgotten things, the echoes of screams from stars that had died 1 billion years ago. The pressure increased, and the sphere of light from Lyra's staff shrank by another pace, the darkness pressing in, patient and hungry. They were close. The final descent had begun, and there would be no turning back. Section 22 of 30. The beachhead of nothingness. The crater was not what Kaelen had expected. He had envisioned a scar of impact, a violent wound of shattered rock and scorched earth. What lay before them was something far more insidious. The trees simply stopped, forming a perfect, stark line of bone-white petrification. Beyond that line was a vast, circular basin perhaps 1/4 mile across. The ground was not earth or stone, but a smooth, seamless plane of obsidian that reflected nothing, a perfect black that seemed to swallow the light from Lyra's staff, giving back only a dull, featureless gray. It was as if a god had taken a cookie cutter to the world and removed everything, dirt, rock, life, history, leaving behind only a void given a superficially solid form. In the exact center of this obsidian plane stood the source of the blight. It was the shard of darkness, the parasitic twin to the fragment of Lyra Prime that Kaelen carried. It was a jagged spire of the same non-reflective black material as the ground, but where the ground was flat, the shard was a chaotic, twisted spike, like a frozen lightning bolt of anti-creation. It pulsed not with light, but with a rhythmic, visible absence. Every few seconds, a wave of deeper blackness would emanate from it, a shock wave of silence that made the air itself seem to flinch. Around its base, the air shimmered and twisted, a heat haze of unreality. This was the final preparation. They stood at the tree line, the last outpost of a world that still, however tenuously, existed. The sight of the shard of darkness was a psychic blow. Kaelen felt a cold sweat break out on his skin, a primal cellular terror urging him to flee, to hide, to do anything but approach that monument to his own failure and the universe's negation. Lyra gripped her staff with white-knuckled intensity, her face a mask of revulsion and determination. The hearth light within the staff flared in response to the proximity of its absolute opposite, the white light burning with a desperate, defiant intensity. "We cannot fight that thing directly," Kaelen said, his voice barely a whisper, stolen by the dead air. "Its very nature unmakes energy. Your light, my power, it would be like throwing water into a desert." "Then what is the plan, Starweaver?" Lyra asked, her eyes never leaving the pulsing spire. "We did not come all this way to simply bear witness." Kaelen's mind, The mind that had once calculated the gravitational constants of newborn suns raced. He looked from the dark shard to the pouch holding the light shard. Two halves of a single catastrophic event. One was a memory of light, the other an embodiment of dark. They were antithetical, but they were also intrinsically linked. They had been born together in the star's death. The weavers of Etheria have a principle, he said slowly, the idea forming like a fragile crystal in the freezing void of his despair. The principle of resonant annihilation. It is a last resort, used only when a celestial body becomes so unstable it threatens the local fabric of space. You do not fight the unstable energy. You introduce a perfectly mirrored counterfrequency. The two energies, matter and antimatter, light and its perfect opposite, cancel each other out. They annihilate completely. Lyra stared at him, understanding dawning, and with it, horror. You mean to use the shard of Lyra Prime as a bomb? To throw it at its dark twin? Not throw it, Kaelen corrected, his heart hammering against his ribs. We must bring them into physical contact. The light shard is dormant, its song silenced. I must wake it. I must fill it with every ounce of memory, every echo of its former song, until it is a perfect, focused mirror of what it once was. And then I must guide it home, to its other half. The plan was insanity. It required him to do what he had failed to do before his fall, to hold and channel an immense, volatile power with absolute precision. It required him to become a conduit for a star's last song and then use that song to orchestrate a mutual suicide. And it required Lyra to protect him while he did it, to hold back the entire hostile environment with a light that was already struggling. The stalkers will not let us simply walk up to it, Lyra said, her voice tight. And that thing, it will defend itself. Kaelen met her gaze. I know. You must be the shield. I must be the arrow. There is no other way. They shared a long, silent look. No more words were needed. The plan was set, a desperate, near-impossible gambit. Lyra began to chant, a low, powerful melody that was the oldest song she knew, a hymn to the enduring strength of the world. The light from her staff solidified, forming a shimmering, opalescent dome around them. Kaelen knelt, placing the dormant shard on the dead ground before him. He placed his thimble on his thumb, the familiar, cold metal a ghost of his past power. He closed his eyes, shutting out the terror. Section 23 of 30, the breaking point. The moment Kaelen's consciousness touched the dormant shard, the world erupted. It was as if he had dropped a lit match into a lake of gasoline. The shard of darkness in the crater's center flared, a wave of pure negation so powerful it was like a physical wall slamming into them. The opalescent dome around Lyra's staff groaned under the impact, flickering violently, shrinking inward until it was a tight, desperate shell barely large enough to contain the two of them. The keening wind became a shriek, and from the petrified forest at their backs and the featureless plain ahead, the shade stalkers manifested. They did not flow this time. They coalesced, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, rising from the obsidian ground like smoke, their forms more solid, more defined, and radiating a hunger that was now personal. Lyra cried out, a strangled sound of effort and pain. She planted her feet, gripping her staff with both hands, her body trembling as she poured her will, her life force, into maintaining the shield. The conjured light fought back against the oppressive dark, but it was a candle in a hurricane. Kaelen! She screamed over the psychic shrieking. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. But Kaelen was lost. To wake the shard, he had to fully immerse himself in the memory of Lyra Prime, not as an observer, but as the star itself. He was back in the void, the beautiful, terrifying pressure of his core a furnace of creation. He felt the harmony of the silver lyre, the joy of his siblings, then the veil, the unmaking, the cold, the pain, the silent screams. He lived it all again, but this time, he did not let the memory end in fracture and darkness. He fought. In his mind, he held onto the core of the star, to the last defiant note of its song. He poured his own will into it, his guilt, his regret, his newfound determination to protect Lyra and her world. He was not just remembering the light. He was becoming its will to exist one last time. The shard in front of him began to glow. A faint, flickering silver at first, then brighter, steadier. It rose from the ground, hovering at the level of his heart. The sorrowful light was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning intensity. It was working, but the cost was catastrophic. The shard of darkness, sensing its twin being reawakened, reacted with apocalyptic fury. The pulses of absence came faster, hammering against Lyra's shield. A spiderweb of cracks appeared in the opalescent light. The breaking point had arrived. A stalker, larger and more solid than the others, slammed against the dome. A section of it shattered. The tendril of living darkness shot through the gap, aimed directly at Kaelen's exposed back. Lyra, with a final, desperate surge of strength, threw herself in its path. The tendril struck her shoulder, and she screamed, a real, physical sound of agony. The effect was instantaneous. The vibrant, sun-kissed warmth of her magic flickered. A patch of her tunic aged to dust, and the skin beneath turned a waxy, gray color, as if all life and vitality had been sucked out in an instant. She collapsed to one knee, her staff dipping, the protective dome wavering on the verge of total collapse. Kaelen felt it happen. The disruption in the light behind him, Lyra's cry of pain. It was the moment he had always feared, the moment where his focus broke, where the power he wielded slipped its leash. The memory of his original failure, the searing pain of the unraveling threads, the light of a newborn star dying because of his lack of control, threatened to overwhelm him. The awakened shard flickered wildly, its light becoming chaotic, dangerous. He was losing it. He was going to fail again, and this time it would cost Lyra her life. Everything was falling apart. They were lost. The darkness was winning. Section 24 of 30. The anchor of a hearth. The world narrowed to a pinprick of agony and failure. Lyra's collapse was not just a physical blow. It was the severing of his tether to the present, to hope. The meticulously gathered power of the shard, the focused echo of a star's last stand, began to fray at the edges, its beautiful, terrible song slipping into a destructive scream. He was at the precipice, about to be consumed by the very power he sought to command, just as he had been before. Then, through the roaring in his ears and the cold fire in his veins, he felt it. A hand, small and strong, clamped down on his ankle. Lyra. She had dragged herself across the short distance, her body broken by the stalker's touch, her magic spent. But her will was unbroken. She said no words. She had no breath for them. But through that touch, she poured everything she had left into him. It was not the potent, structured magic of the Sunsinger. It was something simpler, more fundamental. It was the memory of the warmth of her cottage, the scent of drying herbs, the taste of chamomile tea, the sight of luminescent moss in a sacred spring, the stubborn, defiant love for a world, for her woods that refused to die even here, at the edge of oblivion. It was an inner revelation, not about cosmic principles or his own guilt, but about the nature of strength. His power as a starweaver had been vast, but it had been solitary, arrogant, built on the premise of control from a distance. Lyra's power was different. It was connection. It was rootedness. It was the strength of the hearth, which draws its power from the home it warms, from the people it shelters. He had been trying to wield the shard like a weapon in his own hand. He saw now that was wrong. He was not the wielder. He was a part of the weapon. Lyra was another part. The shard itself was the final part. They were a triad, a confluence of purpose. He stopped fighting the memory of the star's death. He stopped trying to control its power. Instead, he opened himself completely. He let Lyra's grounding, terrestrial energy flow into him, a stabilizing current in the chaotic torrent of celestial fire. He became a bridge. He channeled her enduring love for her world into the shard's dying song. The star's memory was no longer just one of loss. It was now also a memory of what it was fighting for. Not for its own past glory, but for the future of a world that had shown its fragment kindness. The shard of Lyra Prime did not just blaze, it sang. A single, pure, impossibly clear note rang out, a sound that had not been heard since the constellation's death. It cut through the shrieking silence of the crater like a scalpel. The chaotic light stabilized, not into a weapon, but into a perfect, focused point of intention. It was ready. It knew its purpose. It was no longer a fragment of a dead star. It was a promise to the living. Kaelen opened his eyes. He looked down at Lyra, who gave a weak, bloody smile and a single, firm nod. The shield was gone. The stalkers were converging. There was no more time. He turned his gaze to the pulsing spire of darkness at the crater's heart. The climactic battle was no longer a confrontation of force against force. It was a delivery. It was a guided homecoming. He took a deep breath, and with Lyra's hand as his anchor, he began the final, precise work of guiding the awakened shard across the obsidian plane toward its destined, annihilating embrace. Section 25 of 30. The confluence of light and silence. The air itself seemed to thicken into tar, resisting the shard's passage. The Shadestalkers, enraged by this resurgence of pure, defiant song, swarmed. They were no longer silent hunters. They were a screaming tempest of anti-light, hurling themselves at the point of silver radiance. But they could not touch it. The shard, now stabilized by the confluence of Kaelen's guiding will and Lyra's anchoring love, had become a thing of perfect, focused existence. The stalkers, beings of unbeing, dissolved against its light like shadows in a sudden dawn, their forms unwinding into harmless, dissipating mist. They were not defeated by force, but by the sheer, undeniable isness of the shard's song. Kaelen did not move from his spot. He knelt, one hand on the ground for stability, Lyra's grip on his ankle, the only thing keeping him from being swept away by the psychic torrent. His other hand was outstretched, his fingers moving in subtle, intricate patterns, not weaving new threads, but conducting the one, magnificent thread that was the shard's flight. He was not imposing his will upon it. He was clearing a path for it, using his knowledge of cosmic patterns to navigate the turbulent, null-energy waves emanating from the dark spire. It was the most difficult, most precise working of his entire life, requiring a humility and focus he had never possessed as a star weaver. He was a servant to the light, not its master. The shard of darkness sensed the approach of its twin and its own doom. The pulses of absence became a constant, screaming vibration. The obsidian plane beneath the hovering shard of light began to crack, not with physical force, but with the strain of ontological contradiction. The dark spire seemed to lean forward, a black hole seeking to consume the light. It reached out with tendrils of absolute nothingness, trying to snuff out the song before it could reach its destination. But the song was too pure, too whole. Kaelen, guided by Lyra's grounding touch, wove the shard through the defensive lashings, a needle of starlight dancing through a forest of grasping shadows. The distance closed. 50 paces, 20, 10. The air screamed with the conflict of two absolute opposites. The light from the shard began to dim, not from weakness, but from concentration, all of its energy focused into a single perfect point. The dark spire flared, its void-like nature becoming a vortex that sought to pull everything into its negation. The climactic battle reached its zenith. This was the moment of turning the tide. It was not a clash, but a consummation. As the shard of Lyra Prime touched the base of the shard of darkness, there was no sound. There was no explosion. There was instead a moment of perfect, absolute stillness. A silence so complete it felt like the heart of the universe had skipped a beat. Then light, not the silver of the star, nor the white of their conjured light, nor the gold of the hearth. It was a light of unmaking and remaking, a white so pure it was both color and the absence of all color. It erupted from the point of contact, a spherical wave that expanded at the speed of thought. It did not destroy the petrified trees or the obsidian plane. It erased them. Where the wave passed, the blight, the corruption, the unnatural silence, simply ceased to exist. The Shadestalkers vanished without a trace. The wave washed over Kaelen and Lyra, and for a terrifying instant, Kaelen feared they too would be unmade. But the light felt clean. It was a nullification of the unnatural, not of existence itself. Felt like a great, cosmic sigh of relief. When the light faded, the crater was gone. In its place was a vast, bowl-shaped expanse of rich, dark, healthy soil, steaming gently as if freshly turned by a divine plow. The air was clean and cold, carrying the distant, hopeful scent of rain on earth. High above, through a break in the canopy that had not been there before, the stars shone down. And in the constellation of the Lyre, where Lyra Prime had once been, a new, faint star now flickered hesitantly into being. Not the original, but a phoenix, born from its own ashes and the sacrifice that had cleansed its fall. The victory was absolute. The beachhead of nothingness had been scoured from the world, replaced by the fertile potential of a new beginning. Section 26 of 30, The Scoured Earth. The silence that followed was of a different quality altogether. It was not the dead, hungry silence of the Veil, but the hushed, reverent quiet that follows a great storm. The very air felt newborn, thin and clean and tasting of wet stone and ozone, as after a thunderclap that has cleansed the sky. The oppressive weight that had pressed down on their souls was gone, leaving behind a feeling of dizzying, almost unbearable lightness. Kaelen remained on his knees, his body trembling with a profound, total exhaustion. The psychic conduit he had been was now a scorched and empty channel. He could still feel the ghost of the star's song echoing in the vaults of his mind, a sublime and terrible memory that he knew would be etched there forever. His first conscious thought was not of victory, but of Lyra. Her grip on his ankle had gone slack. He turned, his movements slow and stiff, fear clenching his heart. She lay on her side, her face pale and beaded with sweat, her breathing shallow. The arm that had been struck by the stalker was a horrifying sight. The gray, waxy pallor had spread, the skin looking brittle and necrotic, the veins beneath standing out in stark, black relief. It was a wound not just of the flesh, but of the spirit, a piece of the void's essence left festering in her. The cost of their victory was written plainly on her broken form. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice cracking. He crawled to her, ignoring the protest of his own body. He gently cradled her head, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her clammy forehead. Her eyes fluttered open, the rich soil brown of them clouded with pain, but conscious. She managed a weak, ragged smile. "The song," she breathed each word an effort. "I heard it at the end. It was beautiful, not sad anymore." Tears welled in Kaelen's eyes, spilling over and tracing clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. They were tears of relief, of grief for the star, of awe for her courage. "You saved me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your touch, it was the anchor. I would have been lost without you." He looked around. The immediate aftermath was a scene of both devastation and miracle. The blighted forest for a half-mile in every direction was simply gone, replaced by the vast, empty bowl of fresh, dark earth. It was a scar, but a clean one, a blank slate. At the very center, where the two shards had annihilated each other, the soil was fused into a smooth, glassy patch, from the center of which sprouted a single, impossible sapling. It was no tree he had ever seen, its bark a silvery gray, its few leaves a shimmering, metallic green that seemed to hold a faint inner light. It was a child of both worlds, born from the confluence of celestial sacrifice and terrestrial resilience. The victory was undeniable. The source of the blight was eradicated. But as he looked down at Lyra's suffering form, he understood the personal cost. The battle was won, but the war for her life was just beginning. The relief of survival was tempered by the sharp, urgent fear for his friend. The cosmic scales had been balanced, but on a personal level, the debt had only grown. Section 27 of 30. The long walk home. They could not stay. The elemental purity of the scoured earth was already attracting attention. From the healthy edges of the forest, curious, tentative life began to return. A brave sparrow landed on the rim of the bowl, tilting its head. A breeze, a true, fresh wind, rustled the leaves of the surrounding trees, carrying the scent of living pine. The world was already beginning to heal itself, but it was no place for the wounded. Kaelen's own strength was a flickering ember. The act of channeling the star's final song had drained him of more than energy. It had drained him of the will that had sustained him through his long exile. All that was left was a raw, primal directive: get Lyra to safety. He fashioned a crude travois from 2 sturdy, fallen branches and his own torn cloak, carefully securing her onto it. Her sun lantern staff, its light now returned to a softer, warmer gold, purified by the great annihilation, lay beside her, its glow a comforting presence in the vast, open space. The journey back was a slow, painful pilgrimage. Every step was an agony of effort. He was no longer the fallen celestial being, nor the desperate hero of the climax. He was simply a man, bent under a burden, dragging a friend back from the edge of death. The path they had taken in, fraught with terror and blight, was now different. The forest was already reclaiming the fringes of the blighted area. Green shoots pushed through the gray soil, and the air, while still carrying the memory of decay, was filled with the sounds of returning life. The whispering woods were whispering again, their tone one of curiosity and slow, grateful healing. Lyra drifted in and out of consciousness. In her lucid moments, she would direct him, her voice a thin thread. The stream. Its water will be clean now. Follow it downstream. He did, using the water to clean her wound and to drink. The gray necrosis on her arm had stopped spreading, but it had not receded. It was a dormant poison, a piece of the void trapped within her, held at bay only by her own formidable life force and the lingering, cleansing energy of the great light. They passed the last leaf. The great tree was no longer weeping black sap. Its leaves, while still pale, showed hints of returning green, and the face in its bark looked peaceful in sleep. It was a sign that the heart of the woods was mending. After what felt like an eternity of staggering through the green twilight, the familiar, blessed sight of Lyra's cottage appeared through the trees. The golden hearthlight, now blending seamlessly with the surrounding forest once more, shone like a beacon of everything they had fought to preserve. As he crossed the final threshold, dragging the travois into the warmth and safety of the home, Kaelen's legs finally gave way. He collapsed beside Lyra, not in a faint, but in the utter, complete surrender of a task completed. They were home. Section 28 of 30. The weaving of a new light. The deep, soul-weary sleep Kaelen fell into was a healing abyss. He slept for a full day and night, and when he awoke, it was to the smell of broth and the crackle of the hearth. For a moment, he was disoriented, the memories of the crater and the singing light feeling like a distant, fevered dream. Then he saw Lyra, propped up in her bed, her injured arm heavily bandaged with poultices of fresh herbs. She was still pale, and the shadow of pain lingered in her eyes, but she was awake, and she was smiling. "You look worse than I feel," she said, her voice regaining some of its old strength. The following days and weeks were a time of slow, quiet convalescence for them both. Kaelen's body recovered its strength with the resilience of the mortal form he had long neglected. But his spirit was the true patient. The guilt that had been his constant companion for years was not gone, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a chain binding him to the past, but a scar that reminded him of the cost of failure and the value of second chances. He had faced the embodiment of his greatest mistake and had not run. He had stood, and with the help of another, he had set a part of it right. Lyra's recovery was slower. The wound on her arm was stubborn, the necrotic gray flesh refusing to heal fully. It was a permanent mark of her sacrifice, a piece of the silence she had taken into herself so that the world could sing again. Yet she did not resent it. She treated it as a teacher, a reminder of the fragility of light and the ever-present pressure of the dark. Their relationship growth had solidified into a deep, unshakable bond. They were no longer just allies of circumstance, but kindred spirits, two weavers of different looms who had created something new together. Kaelen helped around the cottage, using his meticulous hands for true creation now. carving wood, repairing the roof, tending the garden. He found a peace in these simple, tangible acts that all the cosmic glory of Etheria had never given him. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "The woods need a new guardian for the scoured lands," she said. "The sapling that grows there is a symbol, but the earth is raw, the patterns of life are broken. It needs a gentle hand to guide the regrowth." She paused. A hand that understands both the patterns of the stars and the patience of the earth. Kaelen understood what she was offering. Not a return to his old life, but the gift of a new one. Purpose, not as a star weaver, but as a steward of the reborn earth. It was a resolution that felt more right, more true, than any he could have imagined. He looked at his hands, no longer seeing the instruments of a failure, but the tools for a future. He nodded. "I would be honored," he said, his voice full of a quiet certainty he had not known he possessed. Section 29 of 30, The Steward of the Scar. With Lyra's guidance and his own burgeoning connection to the terrestrial world, Kaelen began his new work. He returned to the great scoured bowl, now bathed in sunlight. The silvery sapling at its center had grown a few inches, its light-catching leaves shimmering. He did not try to force the land. He did not weave or command. He followed Lyra's teachings. He scattered seeds of hardy grasses and wildflowers brought from healthy parts of the forest. He diverted a small rivulet from the clean stream to water the barren soil. He simply spent time there, sitting in silence, his presence a gentle invitation for life to return. And return it did, with a speed that spoke of the land's innate vitality. Now freed from the blight, green began to spread across the dark earth. Within weeks, the bowl was a carpet of soft grass and colorful blooms. Birds nested in the protective branches of the silver sapling. Insects buzzed, and small animals ventured in. Kaelen became a familiar, quiet figure, a guardian who did not dominate the landscape, but belonged to it. He learned to listen to the land's own song, a slow, patient melody of growth and renewal that was more complex and rewarding than any celestial harmony he had ever known. He visited the last leaf often. The great tree was now in full leaf, a vibrant, healthy green, its bark smooth and whole. It no longer spoke in words, but it communicated in feelings, a sense of deep gratitude and welcome. The whispering woods had accepted him, not as a celestial overlord, but as one of their own. Lyra's arm never fully healed. The gray mark remained, a permanent stiffness in her fingers. But she learned to work with it, to channel her magic through its resistance. And in doing so, her hearthlight gained a new, resilient quality, a core of endured darkness that made its warmth all the more precious. They were both marked by their battle, but they wore their scars not as wounds, but as badges of a hard-won peace. The resolution was not a single event, but a continuous process. The loose ends of their lives were not tied up in a neat bow, but were woven into a new, stronger tapestry. Kaelen's past was not erased, but integrated. The man he had been was the foundation for the man he had become. The woods were healing, the sky was clear, and a new, gentle light watched over the place where silence had once reigned. Section 30 of 30, The Final Reflection. A year to the day after the annihilation in the crater, Kaelen stood at the edge of the now thriving meadow. The silvery sapling was now a young tree, standing tall and straight in the center of a field of wildflowers that swayed in a gentle breeze. It was night, and the sky was utterly clear, a velvet tapestry embroidered with countless stars. He no longer looked at them with the aching longing of an exile, nor the terrified guilt of a failure. He looked at them as a neighbor looks upon the lights of a distant city, with respect, and with a gladness for the peace of his own home. His gaze found the constellation of the Lyre. The new star, the phoenix star born from the confluence, shone with a steady, peaceful silver light. It was not as bright as its predecessor, but its light was clean, untainted by sorrow. It was a promise kept, a song finished. Lyra came to stand beside him, her sun lantern staff in her good hand, its light a soft echo of the stars above. She did not speak. She simply stood with him in the quiet communion they now shared so easily. Kaelen thought of his long journey, from the heights of Etheria to the depths of despair in a dusty village, to the terror of the blighted woods, and to this moment of perfect, quiet peace. He had sought redemption as a grand, cosmic gesture, a fixing of the broken scales. But he had found it here, in the patient mending of a single, wounded piece of the world. The greatest weaving, he now understood, was not the grand tapestry of the cosmos, but the small, daily acts of care that connected one life to another, one world to its star. He looked down at his hands. There was no grand power in them anymore, but there was strength enough to build a fence, to plant a seed, to offer comfort to a friend. He looked at Lyra, and she met his gaze, her smile containing the warmth of her hearth and the memory of their shared trial. The final image was not one of dramatic triumph, but of serene continuity. Under the watchful light of a reborn star, two guardians stood together on the edge of a healed wound, their silent presence a testament to the power of courage, sacrifice, and the simple, unbreakable will to nurture light in the face of any darkness. The story of the fallen weaver was over. The story of the steward was just beginning. And in the gentle harmony between the starlight above and the hearthlight beside him, Kaelen knew, at last, that he was home.